Okay, it is Tuesday, it is 5 p.m. That means it's time for DX Leaders, the webinar brought to you by SwissGem and Deloitte. Today we have episode 5 already from this second season in 2021. And the topic today is extremely exciting because we're looking at the crossroads of technology, urbanization, and infrastructure development. So a new topic that we're looking at on how digital transformation can transform the world of construction and infrastructure. And we have fantastic guests today with me. My name is Lars Friedrich, storyteller by passion. And unfortunately, our co-host, Andreas Enderlin, can't join today because he's on his well-deserved annual leave. So Andreas, if you hear that, I hope you're not, because you should enjoy your leave. Good. So let me introduce our special guests for today. We have Andre Schütz. He's the SVP Global Strategy and Corporate Development at RIB International Holding. Hi, Andre. How are you doing today?
Hi, Lars. All good on my end. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. Then we have Sylvia Ko-Gretton. She's the managing director at Kone Singapore, the horizontal and vertical movement people. Is that right? Hi, Sylvia.
Yes, absolutely. We're into people flow, Lars.
People flows. We'll hear about that more later. And we have, last but not least, Ronnie Gunn here from Siemens. He's the head of business development for smart infrastructure in ASEAN. Hi, Ronnie. How are you doing?
Hi, Lars. I'm good.
Just one question I can't resist. Smart infrastructure, is it a contradiction in itself?
Not really.
Okay. We'll get to that in a moment. As always, big welcome to everybody who's tuning in. We'll use the Q&A function of Zoom webinar. So please start putting in your questions early so that we have time to answer what you want to know. Alternatively, once the questions come in, you can also upvote them to make sure that the most relevant topics are addressed. And now we'll, instead of Andreas, we'll shorten the name a little bit. And we're going to Andrea from our partner Deloitte to give us a quick update on where do we stand with the Digital Transformation Awards.
Thank you very much, Lars. I'm happy to be here to give everyone and all the audience thanks for your support. And now is the time I'm happy to introduce that we have officially closed the entry a few weeks ago. And until now, we received total 46 submissions. It's a really excellent number, and with all different kinds of companies apply with diverse backgrounds across 9 different subcategories you can see in here. We do have different country to participate as well as what is our wish. We have submission coming from Singapore, of course. We have from Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. Also, we have excellent, really good submission coming from Korea. So now it's coming to the very, very nice competition phase. And of course, we would like to also take the chance on behalf of SwissGem and Deloitte as well to really thank all the sponsors. Without your support, it would not be possible. Also, thanks Lars, right? Thanks for the precious communications and all the award supporters. It was really nice to get all the referrals, get to talk to all the companies, explain and get their support. So very happy the way we are here. And what is next for us? So for the next steps, we're gonna come into the closed door pitching, which is the shortlist companies. If you're here today, then you will, in a way, you will get invited to record it. What's your pitching? More details will be communicated by the SwissGem team. And in the meanwhile, starting from early next month, which is in October, we'll start announcing with a jury group. So subcategory by subcategory. And Andre, the good news for you is building infrastructure is one of the more popular subcategories. So it's going to be very, very fun. And so with all this simple update that I'm giving here, and I hope, again, I want to thank everyone for your support. And now there's an exciting move to our next stage, which is closed door pitching. And then, of course, if you keep following the SwitchM's and Deloitte's webinars, and also with LinkedIn, you also get to know on regular basis. We'll also announce who are the top 3 per subcategory. So stay tuned. It'll be very, very exciting month coming forward. Thank you very much. That'll be my update.
Thanks, Andrea. So it's a very, it's actually tough to win the DX, the digital transformation leaders. We've seen last year's submissions, very, very great submissions. We've seen how hard the judges worked on really getting to the bottom on who deserves the title, and it's really great to see that we have nearly 50 submissions from all over the region for this year. So let's go from the awards and let's focus on the subcategory building and infrastructure with today's poll. And before we go into the keynote speech, we'll look into the poll that we always kick off to get an idea where does the audience stand. And we want to ask today, what is the biggest advantage of connected construction? We want to talk about connected construction because it's digital transformation as our theme. And what do you think is the biggest advantage? So we can already fire it up. Is it reducing downtime through proactive asset monitoring? Is it optimizing asset utilization and efficiency? Is it gaining visibility and predictive actionable insights? Triggering automated business processes, or last but not least, enhancing safety? And I know some of them are overlapping, but we just want to get a stand on what do you think is the biggest advantage? So can we fire up the poll, SwissGem team? There we go. Sylvia, if you would have to pick one, what would be yours?
I would go for actionable insights, that's for sure.
Okay, cool. What about Ronnie?
Well, I probably look for optimization, asset utilization, and efficiency.
Okay, and Andre, do you agree, or you have a completely different view?
No, obviously, as everybody could already see, I have the same opinion as Ronnie. I would go for optimizing asset utilization and efficiency.
Okay, and we'll dig a little bit deeper later on why you and Ronnie are standing on that side, and Sylvia is going for the actionable insights. Though, again, I believe there's quite an overlap, but it looks on the perspective on how you approach the topic.
So last, it depends on what comes first. With actionable insights, then you can optimize asset utilization and efficiency.
Okay, so it's Andre, you agree, or is it more a chicken and egg?
I was just about to say it's a fair point, at least.
Okay, cool. So we don't have a contradiction, more like a priority or process part. Let's close the poll and see what our audience thinks. And the winner is optimizing asset utilization and efficiency with close to 40%, followed by reducing downtime. Okay, cool. And actionable insights on 3 with about 20%. So it's actually interesting that we have a good kind of spread here. We have some webinars where it's just a big front runner. So it looks like this topic especially has many different points of views. And let's start with the overview then. Let's kick it off with Andre and his approach to the topic on the way to efficient and sustainable construction.
Correct, Lars. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. And first of all, just to quickly mention it, Andrea, thanks a lot for letting me know that we have a lot of applications in our subsector, right? I'm really happy to hear that. And I mean, as already mentioned, my name is Andre, and in general, I'm more than delighted to be here today with all of you and to basically represent RIB in today's episode 5, as we have already heard, the Crossroad of technology, urbanization, and infrastructure development. What I want to cover today is basically what you can see on the screen right now. It's the topic from 3D to 6D, and I will go into the details a bit later. And the key message is basically the way to efficient and sustainable construction. Hence, what I would like to do is basically focus on efficiency and sustainability. And by that, basically just providing everyone with a quick overview of what is happening in these specific areas. And then obviously in particular in the construction sector from a digitalization perspective. As you can see on the next slide already, what I want to show you guys first is basically construction digitalization trends, right? And when we look at that, is basically what we can consider as the trends are on the right side, already named with connectivity, efficiency, as well as sustainability. And when we look at it from a traditional perspective, we can basically say the traditional approach usually is, and in certain cases still is basically a very siloed approach, right? And at the same time, we can see that sustainability is obviously gaining traction, but to a certain extent, it's still taking or has taken quite a backseat for quite a while. But overall, what we do see is with the move or the steps, step by step, basically towards digitalizations, by using integrated platforms and by focusing more on sustainability, we can basically see those as the key trends moving in the direction of connectivity, efficiency, as well as sustainability. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at it from a productivity perspective. So basically what you can see over here is a couple of numbers, and I would like to highlight a couple of points on this specific slide. So one of the main reasons why we don't see much progress on this in the construction sector is basically the limited investments in technology. So if you compare, and this is just a random sample or random example that you can see here, if you can compare, for example, the construction sector to the insurance sector, you can basically see how much more is being invested in the insurance sector in digitalization. And you can basically see at the same time how this basically drives productivity. Obviously, insurance is a completely different sector, but at the same time, we can basically do this comparison with almost any other sector. We can replace it, and we will always see similar results, that in particular, the construction sector is far behind other sectors. And that's basically something that needs to be taken into account and needs to gain much more traction in the future. Another reason that we can see usually is that in the construction sector, we are facing a lot of, I call it always traditional thinking, right? You can basically see that if people are saying, oh, it always worked in the past, so it will always work in the future, is something that is unfortunately still out there. But at the same time, we do see that it gains more and more traction, that people are realizing that there's a need for change, right? Basically getting over this and basically realizing we can't continue the way we did for the past 100, 150 years. We need to basically move into the future. Overall, what we can see, which is on the good side, basically, is we can see that the construction sector is moving into the right direction. But at the same time, we do see that it's happening at a much slower pace than in other sectors. Hence, what we need to look at, for example, as well, is we need to basically look into specific investments that are, for example, happening. And with that, basically, the next slide, please. So what we can already see on the left side is, obviously, as seen on the slide before as well, there is already money being spent in digitalization, right? And money is being spent in specific tools, etc. And tools are already being used. But what we do see at the same time is that most of these tools are not really connected, right? Which is one of the big problems. And hence, when we look at it, it's not just about investing, right? Obviously, everybody can just invest money and think, okay, things will move forward. But it's at the same time about investing in the right technology. And from my perspective, that is basically talking about what you can see on the right side. It's investing in tools that are connected, that can share data, and that can be integrated with each other so that you're basically able to make the best usage of available data. And just to highlight two of the numbers that you can see on the left side at the bottom is we are talking about 13% of construction teams' working hours are spent looking for project data. So you can already imagine how much time is basically being wasted on looking for data. At the same time, we still see that 95.5% of all data captured goes unused in the industry. So we can basically talk about a massive amount of data that could technically be available and that could technically be connected with other solutions, with other tools, etc., but basically remains unused because not the right tools are being used, or the tools are not basically connected with each other. Hence, what we can overall see is that by going towards connectivity as well as efficiency, we can basically see how that can be considered as a new digital strategy that basically shows the way forward and the way we can basically increase and optimize the construction sector. At the same time, obviously, I want to be a bit critical as well. It's pretty simple and pretty easy for me to be here and to say, yeah, we need to move into digitalization and we need to move into the right direction. But at the same time, obviously, I'm aware of the fact that it's quite hard to implement, right? So it's definitely something where we need to change minds, educate people, and make sure that we can all together move into the right direction. In the long run, what I believe is, I personally believe that companies who are willing to face the so-called, let's call it digitalization challenge, will be of greater importance in the future, right? So for me, it's imminent that basically companies need to realize that, whether today or tomorrow, but rather sooner than later, in order to be of importance in the future. And with that, basically looking into the sustainability area on the next slide. Thanks. So when we look into the sustainability side, we can basically see with some simple numbers the impact of the construction sector on carbon emissions in Asia, right? And what we can clearly highlight is that the impact is just massive, right? When we look at it, when we look at whether it's about indirect buildings, direct buildings, it's a massive amount of carbon emissions that are related to construction. And if we look at, for example, this overall percentage of 35, it is basically related to 4,670 megatons per year on carbon emissions that are basically related to construction. And when we set that into the relation of the global context, we are basically talking about 1/3 of the global carbon emissions per year that are just happening in the construction sector in APEC, right? So in Asia, sorry. So this is basically a massive amount that we are talking about. And on the other side, a massive opportunity where we can optimize. Therefore, what we obviously need to do is we need to put a much bigger focus on reducing the carbon emissions, whether it's relating to buildings or to indirect buildings, carbon emissions, whether it's related to direct building carbon emissions, or whether it's, for example, related to the material manufacturing that is obviously always the base for any construction. I personally believe that if we use technology in the right way, it will be possible that we can remove and reduce carbon emissions to a certain extent. And obviously, at the same time, it's something where I'm fully aware of the fact it's nothing that we can do today or tomorrow, right? And it's nothing that will happen overnight. But if we tackle this challenge, we can basically overcome it step by step and can basically make sure that the carbon emissions, in particular in the construction sectors, will be reduced significantly. If we then continue to the next slide and look at it a bit from a technology perspective. So as I highlighted at the start, I was talking about the 3D to 6D, right? What you can see here is basically our definition of what these dimensions are basically standing for, right? We usually have as a basis the 3D model. And what we basically think is the best way moving forward is connecting the 3D model with the 4th dimension of time, the 5th dimension of cost, and last but not least, but more or less the most important one these days, combining it with the 6th dimension of sustainability. Obviously, in order to reach that, it's not just with technology provider or with solutions itself, right? Key roles in order to reduce carbon emissions are, for example, with material suppliers, logistics vendors, contractors, as well as basically ourselves, the users of the buildings, right? So obviously we ourselves play a massive impact as well on the carbon emissions in relation to construction. At the same time, what we can do with technology is basically by using technology, we are able to quantify, optimize, and monitor carbon emissions during all stages of a building, for example, a building, whether it's the planning stage, whether it's the building stage, or whether it's the operating phase afterwards. And by doing this, this will basically be one of the key factors to reduce overall carbon emissions and then basically reach the so-called or always mentioned net zero, or as we have already heard from some companies, basically going beyond that, right? Basically removing carbon emissions that have been out there in the past. But at the same time, it's again one of the factors where we need to be at least to a certain extent critical as well. As much as we are always praising data and saying data is basically the solution for quite a fair bit of things, it's always a big or a very important thing to highlight that in order to achieve this goal, it's not just about having data and being able to make use of this data. It will also be very important to make sure that the data is, first of all, reliable, right? And at the same time, accepted by people, right? Because the moment you have data that nobody believes in or nobody can trust, what is the purpose of basically coming up with some fancy projections on saving in relation to carbon emissions? So overall, from my perspective, efficiency and sustainability go to a certain extent hand in hand. And basically by saying that, it's the more efficient existing and recyclable resources can be used, the more sustainable the output will be. And that is basically all I wanted to cover for today. And let's move to the final slide. Thank you very much for jumping in, and basically let's run together into an efficient and sustainable future.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Andre. So let's directly jump into a few follow-up questions. If I understand correctly, your job is supporting companies in the construction sector on their digital transformation initiatives, right? And you're having a strong accounting background, if I'm not mistaken. So you must love the numbers.
That is absolutely correct. But at the same time, it's obviously important to be critical with numbers as well, right? As I mentioned, otherwise you can't take numbers for taken or for given. Otherwise, you're usually going in the wrong direction.
And is that a problem? I think one of your slides, you showed that there over 90% of the data collected in the construction sector is not utilized.
Correct.
So are we collecting the wrong numbers, or they're not reaching the right targets, or is it one speaks Spanish and the other Japanese?
I would say it's a bit a mix of everything, right? So to a certain extent, it's that, for example, data is just being stored somewhere. People are leaving companies, data is lost because nobody has access to it anymore. At the same time, usually companies are not really having some central share points where data is being stored and being available for everyone. So if you go to future projects where you just know I need to look into a past project, then I have some data available. What happens these days, you realize, oh, the person left, the data is not there, we need to restart basically. So it's a bit of a mix of kind of a lot of factors that are playing into this.
So where's then the bulk of investments into digital transformation in this sector going into?
So that is basically quite interesting, because as you could see on one of the slides, right now it's to a certain extent already going into tools, right? And I think that's at least the right direction. But at the same time, you can still see that it's going into all kind of tools. So everybody thinks, okay, I have a tool for solution X and a tool for solution Y. And then you're still standing there at the end and realizing, if I now want to connect this kind of data, then actually I still have a couple of problems, because somehow the data is not able to be connected. The data can't be used in other tools and other systems. So from my perspective, it is definitely going towards this direction of having, for example, connected and integrated platforms where it's ensured that data is basically available and can be used in different sections of, for example, a normal construction cycle.
Okay, but maybe one follow-up question before I want to invite the other panelists to the discussion. The construction industry has a little bit of a image of being very traditional. It's literally the bricks and mortar business. So is that the biggest part that's holding the industry back on faster transportation? And or is it the setup? Because you have so many subcontractor levels that the guy who just drives the trucks might not be interested to know what's the energy consumption of a building that's completed in 5 years.
Yeah, no, fully agree. I think what we see is literally this traditional thinking, right? And that obviously, for example, happens whether you look at the subcontractor, right, who's maybe only doing one certain task. And what I believe what will help to move that into the right direction is obviously, if we are not talking about the subcontractors, but if we are approaching, for example, the contractors, who then obviously have an influence on the subcontractors, right? So basically, if we convince contractors to basically move towards the digitalization journey, it will immediately have an impact on the subcontractors as well, and therefore basically help the whole industry.
So it's the typical top-down that we see in other industries. The main RFP caller, he defines what are the standards to be followed.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Maybe let's move over to Sylvia. And I know you have a huge experience in real estate. You worked with Capital Land for a long time and others, JLL, and now with Kone. So Kone is building elevators, escalators, people movement systems. So it's quite essential from the planning stage to the operation lifetime to be really plugged in projects. Maybe for the key question. So by default, the product and services you are providing are already very mechanical, if I can say, right? So with that, how are technologies changing your part of the industry? Because is it a lifespan part? Because and we had that pre-discussion, like, yes, if I construct a new state-of-the-art project, the newest, the best will come in, but your company is also servicing infrastructure that has been around for 20, 30 years. So how do you make sure that in this industry, that what has to be good next year is also good in 20 years at the same time? How do you help the people that made the choices 20 years ago to transform? Or do we really have to say, okay, that's done, and we only focus on the future?
Lars, there's like 5 questions in one. Okay, so let me try to perhaps break it down. So maybe the first question really is around the innovation and the transformation that we have seen. I don't know if many of you are aware, but the lift and escalator industry has been around for over 100 years. And Kone, is celebrating our 110th anniversary this year in November. Now, of course, a lot of things has transformed. While initially it did begin as a mechanical system and hand cranking the car up, we have seen it move a long way to where we are today. So some of the innovation and the transformation is really around, first of all, materials. As Andrea kind of alluded to in his presentation, more sustainable, greener material is certainly the call of the day. 90% of our material can be recycled at the end of life. So there's a lot of innovation that has went into achieving that sort of a high recyclable rate, for example. We have also looked at replacing what will be more traditional carbon heavy sort of material, such as steel cables, into carbon fiber cables that will last longer, and so on and so forth. Then on the digital side, the connectivity piece is definitely something that we are very focused on. We are one of the pioneers to have the open API platform such that the lifts and escalators can be easily connected to other systems, such as those that Siemens has. So these are all different innovations that we have put in, and also in the lift and escalator industry, we are increasingly seeing more and more of that. Now, what's coming in the future will be things like robotic installation, for example, AR and VR repairs abilities and capabilities. So we are going to see a lot of very interesting, I think, changes in this industry going forward that I'm really very excited about.
Thanks for answering like 4 out of my 5 questions right away.
What was the one that I missed?
It's like, so one thing is the innovation that's moving forward, but what do you do with customers that are already with you for 20 years?
Right.
How do you help companies that made their big infrastructure investments 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah. So yes, sorry, I did forget that one. I think Lars, to be very frank, some of the buildings, so some of the older buildings will certainly have a structural challenge, right? So that we can try to bridge by putting in products that we can still be connected and be able to get some data and some insights out of, but perhaps it will not be as good as what you will get out of a greenfield kind of development, that's for sure. But I think the industry, again, it's fast developing, and where for an asset owner, actually the new buildings are a small percentage of the portfolio. So the big parts are really around the older buildings and how we can then refurbish them with the newest equipment that is sustainable, as well as be able to have different connectivity feature to enable it to bring it up to speed. But depending on the building, we may not be able to achieve the same level as, for example, a brand new building.
But it's maybe it's a little bit, is it right to use an analogy like an combustion engine powered vehicle with an upgraded technology is still better than an old school car, but it's not an electric one?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, you know, whatever progress we can make is definitely one step closer to meeting the connected industry sort of a vision.
Okay. One follow-up question, and sorry, and then it's already, I think, 6 or 7 that I kind of squeezed in there. That was about your pick on the poll question. You said that the biggest advantage would be visibility and predictive actionable insights. Why was that your choice?
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, actually having data, and I think Andreas said in his presentation as well, actually having the right data and having the data in the right kind of dimension, for lack of a better word, is actually very critical to enable the downstream sort of asset owners, analysts to run the different simulations in order to meet the asset utilization, efficiency, optimization kind of work. Without data, you have nothing. So that's kind of where we are focused very much on, and that is that whole connectivity piece. Okay,
thank you. Ronnie, now over to you. You've been listening quite intensely here. So now let's look at it from the Siemens and smart infrastructure perspective. You picked a different part earlier. You said optimizing asset utilization and efficiency is the key advantage of digital transformation in the construction and infrastructure industry. Besides the first this, then that kind of reasoning, why do you think this is really the biggest advantage to move the industry?
Well, if you look at the building industry, it is like what Andreas mentioned. It's really a brick and mortar industry. It's really old-fashioned, but it is also an industry with the most equal partners, right? You have your architects, your M&E consultant, you have people like Kone, you have security consultants, you have the truck drivers, etc. And without that single source of truth, without the ability to have the digital insights, without those data being harnessed, we can't really talk about being efficient. We can't really talk about running an operation tight and proper. And in my opinion, that's really important from a building perspective, because we spend 90% of our time indoors, and in today's context with all these lockdowns, maybe close to 100% of our time indoors, right? In some kind of building, whether to live, to learn, to work, to play. And buildings are critical because they are the foundation building blocks of any city, any smart and sustainable city. And we believe and really aspire to want to create that environment that really matters, that perfect environment that cares for you and I. And for the longest time, the building industry has always been talking about non-living things. And I think now it's about time to look at putting the people in the center of the entire conversation and make it a lot more people-centric.
That's why Kone is a people flow company, first and foremost. In this, yeah. Okay. So then if we put people first, environments change very, very quickly.
Right.
The last 18 months are kind of an example for that. So how do you think the construction infrastructure industry has to change to build design for more flexibility? Because then we're talking about life cycles, right?
Yeah.
A building is supposed to stay like it is for, I don't know, 20 years untouched, more or less.
Yeah.
But in 5 years, people might want something different. So how do I create real smart infrastructure where the bricks and mortars are part of a more flexible approach, human-centric approach?
That's a good question. And coming back to your first question at the start of the seminar, whether smart infrastructure is a contradiction, I say it's not, because buildings started as traditional buildings where it is about a central generation plant, where there is everything was very centralized. There isn't a testing and development environment. If you have a automated building management system, that's wow, right? And then he has moved on over the last decade into what we call a prosumer, a building that produces and consumes energy. Yeah, that's something we are familiar with today with solar, right? With EV charging, or sorry, with PV panels on rooftops. But that evolution is going to move on into what we really call smart buildings, and buildings that predicts, buildings that deals with the grid, because now you have a new animal, so to speak, called electric vehicles that's going to suck energy out of it. How are you going to balance that? How are you going to balance the temperature in say the office space, for example? I know we all talk about thermostats, we all talk about oh, I want the temperature to be about 24 degrees. But honestly, between you and I, it's more about, do I feel cold or do I feel hot? I don't care whether it's 24 degrees or 23 degrees, right? I want something that I can intuitively tell the system that I'm feeling warm. And with all this data set collected, the system should then be intelligent enough to say, hey, you know, Ronnie's coming to office, he's booked his desk, and he typically feels warm when he comes in the morning. So let's adjust the temperature a little bit, yeah? In Singapore, we have platinum LEED standards. Now we have extreme light energy consumption kind of buildings. One of the things that we found in the past is that most facility managers, which is a key stakeholders that we typically don't address, sets the thermostat for a building at say 24 degrees. Yeah, but in the morning, you don't really need to set at 24. In the office, you go in, you typically still think that it's cold. I need a draft of air rather than the coldness of the air. So if with that kind of data set that we collected, we realized that, hey, in the morning, if I turn on the HVAC system at 26 degrees at 7 a.m., it's pretty cool. People are quite happy with it. Nobody complained that aircon is too cold. At about 10:30, I will start reducing the temperature in the system because it's getting warmer. Probably blast it at about 12:30 before everyone comes back from lunch, which is hot outside, and then start cooling it or turning it up again towards the end of the day. That simple sine curve has a significant impact on energy. And we have done that in several buildings, one in Capital Land's asset, which we probably are one of the major tenants in. And we looked at savings of up to maybe about 120,000 Singapore dollars every year on utility bills. That's about 590 tons of carbon footprint reduction. In very layman term, 6,300 four-room HDB flats a year. That's how much energy we could save by just putting in artificial intelligence, by just tweaking, and all these cannot be done without data, without insights into the data.
Okay, so then let's look at it from a practical level, right? So what's an $120,000 sounds like great savings, but I'm sure it also comes with costs to be flexible, whatever. What's an ROI kind of time frame or a horizon that gets building owners excited?
That's interesting question, because it really depends on which vertical. So in an office space, it's difficult to quantify the ROI because it's a little bit longer term, because office don't typically operate 24 hours, right? I'll give you another example that we did, and this is for a hotel, right? And we all know comfort of hotel residents are most important. So the aircon is always cold, right? And we did this exercise for a luxury hotel back in Malaysia, I think it's about 500 rooms hotel. And we look at an energy saving of 43% with an ROI that they finally achieved less than 2 years instead of a projected 3 to 4 years window. So that's quite good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last, if I can just jump in here, I think, when the asset owners look at this sort of investments, it's really not a single lens, right? So typically, an asset owner will look at things such as operational efficiency. So this is where your ROI, your energy savings and so on will come in.
Exactly.
But they will also look at sustainability angles increasingly, right? I don't know of any major developers who have not come up with a sustainability master plan of some sort. So the ability to actually show circularity, the ability to be able to hit some of the ESG targets. This would be another big angle that the asset owners will consider when they think about this sort of investments. And last but not least is the whole experience piece. Experience is very hard to quantify. We can't say, hey, people are happy, therefore it's $2 more. I mean, it's not quite like that. But when your building is well designed, tenants will know it, they can feel it.
Yes.
And so over time, theoretically at least, you should be seeing a higher ability to command a premium rent. You should be able to see higher retention rates among your tenants. So these would all be kind of matrix that an asset owner will look at when looking at all these investments.
So then directly following on that point, before I'll go to Andre, how well is a building designed? And COVID brought many changes upon us, right? For example, the typical 9 to 5, I mean, it never worked in Singapore by default, we work longer hours, but the typical, we all come in the morning, we all leave at the same time, the government mandated we shouldn't, and now we generally hybrid models, right? So a lot of the changes that are happening now and said, hey, we switch off half of the elevators at 6 p.m. wouldn't work anymore. So do a lot of those changes happen because people demand them? Does it come from the asset owners? Who drives that change, and who makes sure that change to more flexibility and smartness in a building is successful? So what are the success factors that really make it happen? Again, at least 5 questions, I know.
Well, I think, to be very honest, most of the asset owners that I have met with are already starting to rethink the whole operational SOPs of buildings. Not just really, in the past, the asset owners would be like, yeah, here's an escalator, it runs from this time to this time, and that's it. But with the kind of emphasis on experience, on customer satisfaction, increasingly tenants are having a say in how the asset owner will think about operating their buildings. So we do have, for example, clients who want to over-service, for example, even during this kind of low occupancy period, and they might say, no, I still want all my lifts to be running. So it really comes back to, I think, a balance of the lenses that I talked about just now: sustainability, operational efficiency, as well as user experience, as they get feedback from their tenants on different aspects of the building.
I think Sylvia's point about user experience is really critical, and it's one of the drivers for digitalization in any building, because having that platform for user to provide instant feedback to whether the facility manager or the asset owner on how the building is performing, or what is the health state of the building, is really critical. And I think that's really cool. Whether the escalator should be turned on at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. in the morning, or should it be by motion sensor that it detects? Of course, motion sensor is one way, but if you have enough data feeds with regards to people moving in and out of the building. When our peak period, is peak period now still 8:30 or is it between 8 to 9:30? Then you change the speed of the elevator, which increases your utility bills. Yeah.
But you know, I'm sure all of us have experienced the model where sorry, we can't have a conference call at 8 p.m. because the central air condition switches off at 6 and at 8 it's unbearable, right?
Yeah.
How can software change that, Andre?
So
software is not the problem, I guess.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely, Ronnie. I mean, work from home is these days always the solution for kind of everything, right? I have this feeling. I know, but obviously when it comes then to software, then it's basically going in the same direction, right? It's basically about software in combination with AI, right? Which is a massive trend in every sector, basically in the construction sector as well, and which is basically something that will help in the future. And what I would like to add on the discussion between Sylvia and Ronnie on sustainability is basically what I can see, what will hopefully put some good pressure on basically the sustainability approach is basically the whole topic around sustainable finance, right? So as long as basically the finance side is forcing people to build new buildings in a sustainable way and to put that in the middle or in the center of the whole construction, I believe this will basically put the right pressure on everybody and will ensure that, for example, whether it's smart elevators or whether it's smart tools, for example, regarding air conditioning, as Ronnie has mentioned, will basically help, right? And this is another big factor. And luckily, in particular, the finance side is gaining a lot of traction on focusing on sustainability and therefore putting good pressure on this whole construction sector as well.
Okay.
Andre, I just hope the financial sector also realize with them embracing technology, it's going to become more expensive. Yeah.
But that brings me back, and just also a shout out to our participants. This is your chance to post your questions in the Q&A. If you want anything particular answered that we haven't addressed yet, please do it now. Otherwise, we might be running out of time. But back to then the different time frames of, you have a REIT that runs on profitability, right? It's an investment vehicle. You have a facility management company that has certain benchmarks, but all of them have different time horizons and interests. How do you bring that together if you go on a massive transformation journey that needs many different stakeholders and not just time, but money investment that might be not in sync with what the, let's say, 3-4 different key parties in a building ecosystem have in common? How do we bring these interests in sync? Who want to give that one a try?
Okay, let me try. If not, we won't end. Yeah, so I think you are right to say that the different stakeholders are at different maturity stage of digitalization or embracing technology in general, right? But one key segment, which is the control systems, the electrical systems, are technology company that really should embrace a platform where they interact. So like, for example, the building management system from Siemens talking directly with Kone's elevators and escalators. That would be a good example. And then us also communicating with the chiller plants from, say, for example, Daikin. Yeah. All of us are from different companies. We don't have a joint venture whatsoever. And we really need to communicate. And that starts at the design stage. Because when you don't look at that from a design, talk about API connectivity, protocol connectivity, and create that digital twin, then it's not going to work at the end of the day. It's going to still be very silo. The whole idea of that digital twin is to allow us this platform where we can test and evaluate the cause and effect of each other's system. So when the elevator runs faster, what is the impact to energy? Yeah, when the weather is cooler outside and I increase the temperature of my air condition by another degree, what is the impact on energy? How do I harness energy from my EV, my PV panel, for example? How do I charge cars? So all these comes in together. And I think the bank has also a critical role in this area, because it's all about this very tight, what I call eco partner of prosumers, people who produce and consume energy within that building. It makes it a very interesting distributed energy system story within a very tight building facility.
Okay, we have a question from Freddie van Royen or Ruin. In your opinion, how will the implementation of AI functionality affect productivity in the office and on-site, as well as how it will have an indirect effect on the environment? So what's the impact that AI can have on productivity and sustainability at the end of the day? Who wanna go at it? Andre, you mentioned AI first in your presentation, so you have to have an answer.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, a short answer would be hopefully a positive impact, right? I mean, that's the reason why it's of such a high interest at the moment for everybody. No, but looking into it, what I do believe is it will have a positive impact, basically by looking at things like Ronnie mentioned, for example, if you can use AI and technology, therefore in general, combined with data to basically figure out certain pattern, right? So what is maybe a pattern that nobody realizes, but maybe needs like a lot of energy, right? And if you then maybe just change some small things, it has a big impact. And these are usually things where I do see that AI can basically help, because obviously if you want to put someone in front of the laptop and tell them, hey, now for the next 2 years, you need to monitor data, it usually doesn't work, right? Or people will just overlook the important parts. But with AI, and as long as you train AI, put in the right data, right? So basically getting back to the point that you need the right data, right? It's not just about having data, but the right data. I do believe that AI will have a massive impact and will basically help optimizing things from basically all angles.
Okay, let's move to the next question. I'm curious, how do you see your particular roles in the smart building ecosystem in 5 years? Sylvia, how do you think your role in smart buildings and the ecosystem will change over the next 5 years?
Well, I don't know if it will change. It is already changing, right? So if you think about a building, a lift and escalator together with the chiller plants, it's probably the 2 biggest M&E item in a building that consumes the most energy and therefore has the most opportunities when it comes to operational efficiency, when it comes to heating sustainability targets, and so on and so forth. So I say that it's already changing because we are already seeing many of our customers looking for our participation in the whole smart building ecosystem. So I think as it matures, that emphasis on these sort of big ticket items like lift and escalators will only accelerate. So that's certainly something that I hope that answers that question.
Okay, thank you. Ronnie.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at the first question that asks about productivity, right? And I think to really talk about it, it's not so much whether AI will improve productivity. The short answer to it is yes, definitely. But AI will definitely improve customer satisfaction or user satisfaction. It will definitely make it a lot more people-centric. And when I, the user, not the tenant, but the user, am happy with my work environment, my productivity increases. Yeah, statistically, it shows that in a people-centric building, productivity increases about 2 to 3%. Not significant, but there's no cost. There's no extra bonus that you have to give or extra benefits you have to give. You just have to create a space that is perfect for people to work in.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question because it just came to my mind, right? I've seen it that in some buildings, like the facility managers are like the king of the castle. What do you have to do for those people to give up that feeling of absolute power?
Sylvia, you were from JLL.
Look, I think, the real estate industry has traditionally been quite slow changing, right? So perhaps some of your observations are probably right in some sense. But again, that whole industry is also changing because of the demands that the tenants and the users and the residents are placing on the managing agents when it comes to different aspects of it. So I think that that industry is definitely also changing. They themselves are going through a whole digital transformation as well. So, at some point we will see the colliding of all of these different stakeholders and players in this whole real estate built environment sector that will start to come together. And we are seeing that more and more in the last few years. And I think we will continue to see that evolve over time for sure.
Okay. Andre, and then I already have to wrap it up in the interest of time. What do you see as the biggest changes that we'll see in the next 5 years on digital transformation in this industry?
I would say the biggest changes for me would be we hopefully get it running, and we hopefully get everybody into it, and we hopefully ensure that people will be educated, will realize the value, will realize the benefits. And if we can achieve that, then I believe what we already are able to provide from a technology perspective will already be sufficient to move in the right direction. It's not the final aim or the final goal, definitely not. There will be a lot more to do, but it will be at least setting the right direction and basically bring us closer to what I mentioned, net zero or beyond net zero from a carbon emission perspective.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we just, so many topics to discuss, and I think we could have discussed for a few more hours, I realized. But in the interest of time, I think I have to wrap it up. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Ronnie. And last but not least, thank you very much, Sylvia. Some of the sound bites I picked up from Andre was, you said one of the issues we face in the construction industry is the lack of connectivity among tools and systems. So that's an ongoing, maybe also generation issue. And I assume we'll face that. You said digitization is not only about investing, but rather investing in the right technology, in this case, tools that are getting connected. Sylvia shared that as an example, the lift and elevator industry has been around for 100 years, and Kone is celebrating its 110th anniversary in November. Happy birthday. But it's come a very, very long way. And you said like 90% of the materials used right now can be already recycled at the end of life. And that's quite a big achievement. And you also said that having the right data and having it in the right dimension is critical in driving optimal utilization across the value chain. So it's not just 90% of unused data as shown in Andre's presentation, but it's having the right data and making use of it. And then we had Ronnie, who said that while the construction industry may be brick and mortar, it's an industry with the most partners. It's very connected by default. However, without that single source of truth, we can't talk about running a proper operation. So one of the key things is connecting the partner ecosystem even more downstream, upstream, and vertically to achieve that ultimate single source of truth. My single source of truth is the team of SwissGem and Deloitte, and they're saying I have to wrap up. So thank you very much, everybody. This was episode 5 of DX Leaders. We are back on 26th of October in episode 6 then with rewiring insurers for growth in a digital age. So we are focusing on the insurance industry. Thank you very much to our sponsors and supporters today. As always, SwissGem and Deloitte, and especially for today, thank you to RIB. That's it. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. Stay safe and see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.